American Civil War. You zoom, 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 it doesn't break up. The glass plate negatives are comparable to any of the digital photography taken today, and the digital capture of that glass plate photography is spectacular. In high school, I spent every spare moment in the library with my nose buried in Miller's photographic issue of the Civil War. Was later able to get an original 1911 edition of that. They reprinted it, but it's like newspaper copies of newspaper copies. But I can throw those away now because we have Library of Congress TIFF files. The presenter that's not here is the third in the lineup, so we'll start out with Trevor. The title of this presentation is Viewshare Floats on Top, an interface layer to cultural heritage collections.
So, hi again. I'm just going to give a quick tour of, timer.
We've got ballpark 20 minutes each and 15 minutes for discussion.
Great, so I'm excited to be here. I'm talking about a third of my time at the library. I spent working on this project managing it. It's called Viewshare, and you can find it at viewshare.org. Here's a shot of the homepage. If you want, you can just sign on and request an account. You can even do that while I'm talking, if you so desire. And as soon as we get around to it, we'll make you an account. It's not just sort of open to anybody. You have to have some vague connection to a cultural heritage organization, which everyone here has. So, feel free to sign up and request an account. And the gist of this is that cultural heritage collections contain extensive amounts of temporal, locative, and categorical information that is really neat to use to explore, to understand them, to visualize, and work with them. And we have these materials in a range of different formats. We have data that's, you may have place information, but you don't have points of latitude and longitude, which is what you need to use to be able to put it on a map. You have temporal information, but it's not in a standardized format that you can use to create a timeline from it. And the idea with Viewshare is that you can be able to create interfaces like geographic interfaces, timelines, image galleries, to material that lives elsewhere. And in the case of the sort of presentation or layers or software layers idea behind this session, Viewshare is one that just floats on the very top of all of those pieces of software. So it's not it doesn't store files at all. So you can, for example, use it with something like Omeka or CollectiveAccess or any number of places that will actually manage your manage your files and information. It requires that you have that information living somewhere else, and then you sort of upload or ingest that information into Viewshare and build your views out of it. And in this talk, I'll give a little bit of background about the tool and then sort of walk you through how it works. And from this, you should have more or less a good sense of how to actually just set up and run the software. So for background, we initially developed this to work with NDIP's partners. There's something like 200 organizations that have partnered with NDIP at the Library of Congress. But since I joined the project 2 years ago, I pushed to make it open to anybody because we actually learn a lot about how to make the software better, and it's not that intensive, again, because it's not a place to store files. We're not storing your files for you. We're letting you build these interfaces. And the audiences for it are really librarians, archivists, curators, researchers, anyone who wants to better understand and explore sort of relationships between items in digital collections. In the most basic sense, what Viewshare can do is take this. So this is a set of mods records. You don't have to read it. Just if you're, it may get you excited with the angle brackets, etc. The mods record, or this, which is just a spreadsheet. Which I get more excited about the spreadsheets than the mods records. It's a little easier to interpret them. So we've got structured data, unstructured data. And then make something like this. So this is actually a view of that spreadsheet that I just had there. That spreadsheet turned into this, which consists of visual displays in the middle. We've got the map view there, where all of those items or whatever it is that you want to pin onto the map. These are actually collections, so it's a spreadsheet of different collections from around the world. And then we've got them colored by, the map pins are colored by one of the data fields, and then on the side we have these dynamic facets. So, you know, any sort of categorical information that you might have inside your collection. And then once you've done that, you can actually embed this in your own website. So here it is embedded in digitalpreservation.gov. If you go to that website and look at the collections page there, you'll actually see this view embedded. And so in the same way that you would embed a YouTube video, there's just one line of code that you use to embed it. And then in a really neat way, it actually exposes the data behind the view too. So if you click on the little scissors in one of those views, you can actually download your own spreadsheet of the data, or you know, a few other formats. And that end result was originally what we developed the tool for. The idea being that we thought it would be really great to be able to make these views and share them. But in the process, we found that interface building is actually a really great way to understand the collections that you're working with to begin with. So some of the most extensive uses of this we have are librarians, archivists, and curators who might not even publish the views that they finish, but actually use them just to get a sense of how this collection is organized, or sort of themes in them, ways to do metadata remediation. For example, if you make a tag cloud, you know, a weighted tag cloud where the terms show up based on the frequency of that they appear. If you do that for states, and then you see a small Tennessee that's got like an extra S in it or something like that, you know, that may have been record 1300 or something like that, and you'd never have known it until you put it in that facet and then see, oh, I should probably go and fix that one. So it ends up being useful in that case too. And so I'll briefly run through the kinds of displays that we have. So there are timelines, lists, charts, galleries, and maps. This is a timeline view, and it's a little tricky to see exactly how it works, but you have sort of a scrolling timeline. You click on items and you see fields for them. Here's another timeline view from a different collection, and this one actually has spans of years, so you can see them spanning different years, and they've just chosen to color them by you know, one categorical piece of information. There are pie chart views, which end up actually being pretty neat as ways to explore categorical information in collections. And part of what's exciting about this is if you click on any of those facets, so this is actually a trade card collection from Brooklyn Public Library, and I love their subjects there. So the trade cards, some of them are about boots, or have boots on them, some of them have clothing on them, you know, some of them have desserts, and then they've got the business types that they are. So in this case, we've clicked on the department stores, and we're seeing that, you know, of the department stores, a chunk of them is, you know, clothing and dress, flowers, women, etc. So it doesn't really care whether or not you're working from a structured, you know, set of data to begin with. It'll just sort of find those patterns and display them for you. And you can sort of play around with the data set and find these interesting relationships. A view I often show people is this one. This is one that I made out of just a set of postcards I digitized from Fairfax Public Library. And in this case, I've got the gallery view up, but on the side, you can actually see that there's a histogram, which is a really neat way to display. I stumbled over every word in that sentence. A neat way to display numerical information, so that you actually you can probe through the collection based on the frequency of particular numeric values, and a tag cloud there. And then this is that same Fulton Street view. An important piece of this is if you look up at the top, there's the map, pie chart, and list view. You can sort of toggle through those as you work with the collection, and in this case, we've got all of them pinned down as they go through Fulton Street. You can also see the, it's cut off a little bit, but the date range facet over there is showing you the frequency at which those years appear in the collection, and you can just sort of pivot and poke through and explore it. And so I already basically mentioned these different facet types as well: lists, histograms, tag clouds. So again, they're all on display here. We have the list views down there, which also show the number of them. So if you clicked on animals, where there's 28, you would then see all of the other facets shift to only show those 28 that have animals on them, and you would only see the 28 items that have animals associated with them on the map. And then I showed you guys the posters one, the postcards one, and then here is an example of when you faceted your way down. This is actually a web archive collection at the Library of Congress of election websites. And it started from a spreadsheet, but then I can select an election year, I can select a particular state, and we filtered down to 56 of the 3,500 items, and then I'm pulling up and looking at one individual one of those. So that's a quick run through of the kinds of things you can do with the software, the kinds of views that you make. And then I'll go through the workflow for you to give you a sense of how this actually works. The goal here in the design of the workflow is that it should be more or less like using Gmail or something like that, where you just sort of sign up and start using it instead of requiring a lot of background experience. So to begin with, you start by importing data. And so once you've got your Viewshare account, if you go to the website, you can go to upload, and you can upload a spreadsheet, a mods file, or if you have an OAI endpoint, you can point to that. If you don't know what an OAI endpoint is, you probably don't have one, so I won't necessarily explain it to you. But if you do, you may be very excited. So we go from import to augment, and this is really one of the neatest pieces of this. So, or it's actually describe and augment. So to begin with, I imported a spreadsheet of postcards, and here you can see it's basically stripped out the titles of those rows. So we've got categories, city, state, all of those things. And then in the middle, there's a type drop-down box that I can use to type that information. So in this case, I've gone in and said that the image URL field is actually images. Those are image URLs. And so when I do that, then Viewshare knows to wrap them in an HTML image tag and show them as images. And then below that, you can see I've also got location, which is a point of latitude and longitude, and an ISO date, which is an international standard for date formats, and a thing called augmented topics. But all of those bottom parts are done through a data augmentation process that you do right inside the tool. So if you click, I go back to this page, and you click on Add, the little green Add button. I should mention too that you don't need to absorb all of this. All this information is presented on the website too, so just try and let it wash over you and have a sense of what you can do with the tool, and then when you try it, it'll either come back to you or you can click and read some of the documentation. Or if you get really lost, you can email me and then I'll help you. So here's the augmentation page, or sort of pop-up that you get, and in this case you pick that you want to create data for a map, and it'll know that it wants to make points of latitude and longitude, and then you pick the fields that you want to use. In this case, I have a city and state field and I have a country field, and I want to combine both of those, and then once I hit create, it will create that field, and then in this case it actually uses a third-party service called GeoNames, which is an open, it's actually associated with OpenStreetMap, sort of an open source competitor to Google Maps, and from that it will ask for each of those city and states in a particular country, what is the point of latitude and longitude for that, and it'll get its best guess and come back with them. And the end result is that you get those, you'll get generally a point of latitude and longitude associated with every item in your collection. If you don't, you can then export the data and clean a few of them up, but it's a really great first pass at having points of latitude and longitude. The other functions on here, the timeline one, will attempt to take any way that you've got dates written and turn them into those international standard dates. And the list one will let you break apart text in a field based on any number of patterns. So it might be colons or commas or something like that, to treat it as an array of information instead of as a full block of text. So from augment, you get to the build process, and the builder actually looks slightly different than this at this point. That's because we're doing this iterative development I was talking about earlier. So it's even easier to use than this, but it's sort of a point and click interface, drag and drop interface, where you sort of pick what things you want to show in which views, and then choose which facets you want to include. And you actually get a preview of exactly what each facet is going to look like as you do that. So it's a very easy way where you just sort of drag and drop it until you like it, and then you click Show Preview, which is up in the corner there, and you can sort of toggle back and forth between the preview and the view until you're happy with it, at which point you hit Publish and you get your view. So we've got my postcards view here. And so the last piece there is then you can share it, and here I've clicked on the little share button, and it gives me the little one line of code I want to copy and paste into my own website. And so once you do that, like I did that here with my own blog, it'll sort of resize it to fit into the space that you've given it, because it's just HTML and JavaScript and CSS. It's not anything It's not like Flash or something like that. So then you can futz with the styling on your own site as well. And that's the software. I think, should I take a couple of questions quick? I didn't go all 20 minutes.
You're fine. You've got 6 minutes if you want to burn it somehow.
I would be happy to burn my minutes with questions.
Did I upload my metadata and images to your site? Did I bring your software onto my site?
Great question. When you have an account and you upload data, you're uploading a copy of the data to our site. You're not uploading the image files or any sort of associated files. Those continue to live wherever. But if you upload a spreadsheet or a set of mods records, you're uploading a copy of it to viewshare.org.
So your site, viewshare.org, continues to hold the presentation layer.
Yes.
And from my website, I'm linking to the presentation layer on your site that I had nice control over. Well done.
Oh, thanks. And yeah, and it's very much, it's actually sort of structurally identical to how YouTube would work. So you upload the video at YouTube and then you embed it in your own site, but the embed on your own site is actually calling YouTube to pull that up. And we've even got instances where folks, there's a great view that an archivist in Texas did where she actually took a dump out of her Content DM database for a particular collection, cleaned up the data a little bit in a spreadsheet, uploaded it, and then actually embedded this view into the home page of that collection, into that collections page. And it sort of seamlessly looks like it's part of that site, even though it's actually calling through our route to get there. But if you click on any of the links in it, you're actually going to the item pages in the Content DM site. And we've got an example that does exactly the same thing with an Omeka install based on this postcards thing. I put a link to that in the document that we've sort of been sharing about this. Yeah? Sure. I can answer questions while I'm doing this too, so. Yeah.
So, oops, that's mine, sorry.
Oh, that's you.
You can just make it a tab.
That's all of.
That's Safari, so if you use Chrome, you'll be in your own little.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was hoping there was the spreadsheet was already up somewhere.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. What was that URL? It's like bit.ly. Okay, yeah, and so off of this document, I have a little self-guided tour of the software, and then I also have a link to this page about how Viewshare and Omeka fit together, and that links out to a place where I've got a view embedded in a site that's also, all of the links in it are to Omeka items in the site. Yeah.
Oh, so my question was just, when you upload images, say in that spreadsheet, that's going to be just URLs to images?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just the path to the images, and then we're wrapping them in the tags. So you probably don't want to do that to other people's images potentially, since you are basically hot linking images to those URLs. But that's a lot less of a problem than it used to be too. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have some postcards for Viewshare that I'll leave up here if anybody wants to get them.
Up next we have Tom Scheinfeldt, the Managing Director of the Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media, and he will tell us a little bit about himself and his organization.
Hi everybody, thanks. I am Tom Scheinfeldt. I'm from the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media. My colleague Clarissa was here earlier. And Trevor is a former, well still a colleague, but a former CH&Mer. I'm going to show a little bit about Omeka today, which is a, what's that?
If you go to the
document.
PowerPoint's already open at the bottom, sir. Just click on that, and then if you go to the window menu, it'll be in the window up top, sorry. Window. Yep.
Oh, window.
Yeah, yours is, I'm sorry, it's just, I opened both of them.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right, okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about Omeka, which is a software product we've developed at the center is a funny word. It is from the Swahili for to lay out your wares, to display all the good URLs we're taking. This is a tradition we've had at the Center for History and New Media. We have another product called Zotero, which is from an Albanian word meaning to, what is it, Trevor, to archive?
To learn or to master.
To learn or to master. So, you know, we had wanted it to be exhibit.com, but that was taken, so we picked Omeka. Omeka is a free open source platform for publishing collections and exhibits online, and people ask me, really, is it free? And yes, it's free. But like any open source product, it is free. There's the old open source software is free like a puppy. It's something you need to take care of. When we were building Omeka, we were very consciously thinking about another product called WordPress. People familiar with WordPress? Okay, WordPress is a very popular blogging platform, an open source product that makes it relatively easy to build and customize. Initially it was only blogs, but now it's really a full-on web publishing, a content management system. We were very much thinking about WordPress. We wanted to build WordPress for museums, or actually WordPress for libraries, archives, museums, and scholars, and really anybody who wants to make cultural heritage public. So that was the idea. It's like something that's as easy as a blog, as make it as easy to launch a collections-based, cultural heritage collections-based website, to make it as easy to do that as to start a WordPress blog. We did that both kind of conceptually, but also in terms of the technology. And to make it, one of the great things about WordPress is there's a huge open source developer community. It's very easy to find a WordPress developer, or relatively easy to find a WordPress developer out there to help you build a WordPress site. We wanted to use some of the same technologies, the same kind of architectural models as WordPress uses in Omeka, so that some of those people who know how to build WordPress sites could also build Omeka sites. And so if you know how to hack WordPress, you're going to be very comfortable learning how to hack Omeka as well. So I'm going to go through a couple of ways in which WordPress and Omeka are alike. They're both based on a LAMP platform, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. You don't need to. It just means that this is a very common, very popular server architecture. Both of them have a simple and flexible theming system. So one of the great things about a WordPress site is you can very easily change the theme of it, sort of at the click of a button. You can make it turn from blue to gray, or you can download a range of themes that have been developed by the community to allow you to change the skin of the site without changing the content of the site. Those things are separate. They both have an extensible plugin architecture. Again, both software packages make it fairly easy to add little bits of functionality to the main core functionality of the software without completely rebuilding the site, without affecting the content or the design. They're open source developer community driven. This was really important to us from the beginning. We started with the idea that we would build an open source developer community, that we would focus a lot of our efforts, and in fact, we tend to spend as much time building up a community around the software as we do actually developing the software, because our idea is, it's really a sustainability question. If we can get a group of people who are actively building the software, who are actively using the software, who have invested in it, who care about it, that's going to take some pressure off of us to maintain it ourselves. And we've been more or less successful with that. There's a fairly robust community. It could be bigger, it could be more engaged, but it's not bad. And like WordPress, it's available as a downloadable package, something that you run on your own server, but also something that you can run on our server. It's available as the downloadable package at wordpress.org or omeka.org, and a hosted web service, wordpress.com, and the analogy, omeka.net. How is it not like a blog? How is it not like WordPress? WordPress is organized around posts and pages. So if you want a site that's primarily text, where the primary unit of content is the text post, and those are, on a blog, it's like they're listed chronologically, reverse chronologically. if that's what you're going for, that's you know, look at WordPress. But if the primary content unit of your website is a collection item, then Omeka is probably a choice you can make. WordPress has kind of a flat metadata structure. When I say flat, that's probably the wrong word. It's fairly simple. It's really, you know, you have a few fields of metadata. Omeka uses a standards-based Dublin Core Collections metadata structure, an extensible Dublin Core structure. You know, WordPress, it's fairly difficult to import collection items from other collections management products because the metadata just isn't set up for that. The database just isn't set up for that. Omeka, it's relatively easy to do that. We have several different import and export options for Omeka, so it's relatively easy to get your stuff in from whatever collections system you're using. You can get it into Omeka relatively easy. So what is Omeka again? It's a lightweight collections-centered open source content management system for museums and cultural heritage. And I want to say that Omeka really is, it can do a lot of different kinds of things. For a smaller institution, it does have a collections back end. It does have standardized a database behind it. It's not like Viewshare, which you're uploading data, but it doesn't hold files and things. It actually holds the stuff. And you can use it as, if you're a smaller organization, you could use it as a collections management system, as a kind of digital archival system. But our Omeka's strength is really collections display, not kind of collections preservation, collections management. It can do that, and a lot of people actually do use it for that at the kind of low end. But it's really much more focused on the collections display. So just very quickly, I'm gonna, how much time do I have? Hours. Okay, great. So here's omeka.org and omeka.net. I'm gonna go and show you a few sites that have been built with Omeka. If you go to omeka.org/showcase, you can get a sense of the kinds of sites that people have built with Omeka. This is as good as any of them to show. This is a site that the Newberry Library and the Chicago History Museum built using Omeka for the Lincoln Bicentennial, I guess a couple of years ago. They got a grant from IMLS, I believe it was in November, to start working on a site that had to be launched by Lincoln's birthday in February. So they chose Omeka to do this because they thought it was something that they could get up and running very quickly and easily. So this is not obviously where the Chicago History Museum or the Newberry Library's collections are managed. This is not their full collections portals. This is just a subset, actually a shared subset of their collections that they wanted to display for a particular public programming purpose. So this is kind of a perfect use case for Omeka. It's where you have a thematic subset of your collections or a particular collection that you want to display and create some interpretive programming around on the web. This is the kind of thing that Omeka is good for. So the way all Omeka sites start is with the archive. As I said, we do have a collections back end to the website. So you can see here they've loaded 270 items from their, I think that's what it was, 270 items from their collections into the Omeka database. And these are actually contained within the database, and they've added metadata to them. They've tagged them. They've uploaded the images. For some of these things, they've used some plugins that Omeka that you can download from the Omeka website. So this is a Zoomify plugin where allows you to zoom in on a document. If you have a JPEG 2000 file, you can zoom in on it. There are other kinds of plugins that you can upload to the site, things for viewing other kinds of documents, Google Maps plugin, timeline plugin, various import-export tools, other things that add some functionality to the website. So all Omeka sites start with these archives of materials, these actual collection items. And then what Omeka allows you to do is to create exhibits based on those items that you've added to the collection. And Omeka uses a section and page structure for exhibits. So you have this exhibit called Lincoln in the West. You break your exhibit script up into sections and then pages. The analogy that we like to make is between the section is like, let's say, a room in a gallery, and the page is like an individual panel or individual display. So that's the kind of metaphor. And so it allows you to build these exhibits with a drag and drop interface. You choose a layout. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of layouts. If you want, 4 images arrayed like this, you can choose that, or an image with so they chose an image with a caption to the side. Here's another layout where they've chosen 5 images to the side, a large image here with some text. You choose your images, you add explanatory interpretive text, and you build out your exhibits like that through a drag and drop interface. And you can make it look however you want. You can see that Omeka sites, like all content management systems, they sort of share a look, and if you have a trained eye, you can tell an Omeka site from it's sometimes easy to tell WordPress sites. They have a shared look, but there's a lot of theming that you can do with them. Here's a here's a website that the University of Minnesota built for their Memorial Stadium. This is a small public library in New Jersey. Let's just get another example. This is a Smithsonian website. So you can see that these sites all have a kind of different look and feel to them. It's relatively easy to do that with the software. Just very quickly, I'll go to omeka.net and just show you that. So all of those sites were located on the institution's servers. They uploaded the software to the server. They built the collections on those servers, and they did all of the development work there. We also have a hosted service where you can sign up for a username and password. Again, you can either have a blog on your own server, or you can sign up for a hosted account. This is like a freemium service, so you can get a basic website, a basic Omeka site for free, or you can sign up for these paid plans, which go to the sustainability of the software. And the more you pay, the more features you get, the more storage you get. It's that kind of very familiar business model. And so I encourage you to you don't have to make a huge commitment to try Omeka out. You don't have to have your own server. You don't have to load anything onto your own server to play around with it. If you want to play around with the very basic functionality, not all of the functionality that's available for the downloadable package is available on the hosted service, but if you want to get a sense of how Omeka works, what the back-end interface looks like, I'd encourage you to just go to omeka.net, sign up for an account. It's free and it's easy, and you can be up and running with a little small collections-based website in really a matter of hours. So take a look, and if there's any time, I can take questions.
So what if your theme has mixed images and documents, and then links to like federal documents? You have your own files of text, and you're having the whole mix
of things that you hold locally and things that are
that all fit with the theme, and that you have to
link out to,
and so it's not all image. And I'm just trying to.
Well, Omeka can handle really any kind of document type, any kind of file type. So audio, video, documents, images, whatever. In terms of if it's located on your site or another site, You could embed documents if those other third-party websites offer embeddable images or documents. If they're public domain things, you can bring them into the Omeka archive, or you can create pages of links where you just link. You could create an item that doesn't have a file, that is just a link to another item somewhere else. That's certainly possible.
Can private individuals set up stuff on Omeka?
Yeah, it's free to everybody. It's just both the service and the software are completely.
Can it be used commercially? Buy it now?
Yeah, it's yep, and actually plenty of commercial outfits use it for their clients and others.
So, my next question, I'm just thinking of my own project right now, is just in Zotero, just kind of collecting everything. One of the plugins, an ability to import that kind of information, or not, but I have to redo it? Like export it into RIS and then.
Right. Well, you would right. There's not a direct Zotero import, or not one that still works. I mean,
is there a Zotero export?
There's not a Zotero export. There was for a time a Zotero import. You could try it. It still might work, depending on what the two projects have diverged again and haven't quite. But you could try that, or we have a CSV importer. That's the other kind of easy way to get things in. Okay. CSV being kind of universal data migration tool.
Tom, if you have a WordPress, can you migrate whatever you have on your WordPress to Omeka without having to start all over? Or
well, I mean,
that kind of
the two database architectures are like completely different. They're just based around very different metadata, very different. I mean, you could shoehorn that stuff in here, vice versa, but they're really designed to do two really different. The kind of WordPress Omeka, there's a metaphor there, like that we were going for some of the strengths of WordPress for what it does. We were shooting at those strengths, but we were doing it for a different set of stuff. All right, thanks.
Next up, we have Seth Kaufman, who will tell us something about himself and CollectiveAccess, or not.
There it is. So my name is Seth Kaufman, and I'm the developer of CollectiveAccess, which is open source software for collections management. So, of course, the standard question is, what is CollectiveAccess? And CollectiveAccess is collections cataloging and management software for museums, archives, special collections, anyone who has a large body of things they need to systematically document and maintain. But it's also collections presentation software. It has a lot of tools for actually publishing your data online. And some of them, as you'll see, are familiar. They're kind of like Omeka, kind of like Viewshare, but it's also centered around this basic function of how do I manage my collection? How do I maintain my custody of it, documentation, manage loans, and things like that. So in a sense, it's actually, is meant to be a replacement, if you want it to be, for things like PastPerfect and other commercial software, as well as a publishing platform. And also, on the slide, you'll see there's a third thing. It's a data provider for exhibit floor and internet applications. What we found is in some cases people are actually using it as a database to maintain a collection of something. It could be oral history, it could be documents, that they're then using to feed other applications that are actually sitting on the exhibit floor, kiosks, projections, even just literally like generated video. And that's been more and more that's actually happening. Everything I'm going to show you is covered under the GNU Public License, the GPL, which is an open source license that's used by lots of projects, including things like Linux, the operating system. So everything's free. It's yours to take. It's all for download. You can do whatever you want with it. We can't stop you. even if we want to. So I just need a drink of water. All right, so CollectiveAccess is a project. We develop it. Some of our users support us, some don't, but we have very clear project objectives. First of all, we want to provide configurable cataloging tools that are capable of supporting most any metadata standard. So we don't have a fixed data model. You get to actually set up what fields you want, how they're arranged on the screen, how they work, how they're validated, and all sorts of other parameters. This is kind of a two-edged sword because on the one hand, you can make it do whatever you want. On the other hand, you have to actually specify what you want to do. You know, not necessarily exactly at the beginning, but before you get so far that you realize that you made a huge mistake. And then, so it means planning, which we'll get into a little later. We're also trying to provide robust public access tools for both web-based and mobile. And this is obviously an iterative thing. As people come through with projects and give us code, they get better and better. And I'm going to show you lots of examples. And also, I would say, if you want to ask any questions, you can stop me in the middle so I can concentrate on what you're actually interested in hearing about. Because I'm going to show you a lot of demonstrations of CollectiveAccess in the public sphere, because this is about publishing content. And I don't know if all of them are going to be of interest to you. So. We also try and take advantage, full advantage, of software applications that are out there that are being developed by the greater community. So for example, we have mapping tools built into the software. We didn't build those mapping tools. They're a thing called Open Layers that is actually, you know, it's a project that's affiliated, I think it's affiliated with OpenStreetMap. It is, yeah. It's an OpenStreetMap project that provides programmers tools for maps, and we've built them into our software. Similarly, you can get the Library of Congress subject headings from within the software for cataloging purposes. We actually go out to Library of Congress and get it via their web services interface. We don't actually have those subject headings. So we're trying to build on top of what other people are doing as well, and the software's been structured so that it makes it easy or relatively easy, or at worst possible, to, I'm not gonna lie to you and say it's always easy, to actually, you know, take advantage of these things. And we'll see some examples of that in a little bit as well. Also, we realize that what we're doing may not be what you want to do, but we have an advantage in that we're free. So at least you can try things out with free software and then realize you've made a mistake and go and buy something. But we've seen lots of examples where people do the other thing, which is they go out and they buy commercial software that's very expensive, and then they realize, oh my God, this is not working for us. And then they usually go to open source because they have no money left. And that's the wrong reason to select a tool is because it's free. It's a good secondary reason to select a tool if it should work. So what we have is something that we also see as like as a test bed potentially for projects where you can at least, you know, find out what you're doing and see if it works. One of our slogans, which we never actually put on a t-shirt, was "Now you can fail for free." It was seen as being a little too dark, so we dropped that. And now it's like the power to be your best is our slogan. And of course, the last one, provide the tools that real-world projects actually need. What we've tried to do from the very beginning is to get people to actually use it who we didn't necessarily know, or whose language we didn't necessarily speak, or whose field we knew nothing about, and then listen to what they said. And in some cases, we knew they were right, but we chose to ignore them because we don't have an infinite amount of time. In other cases, we've actually incorporated it in there. And you'll see that it's actually, the software is actually filtered through to a very wide array of disciplines, and we think it's benefited by that. I'm going to run down the feature list really quickly, and I'm going to show you some samples. These are key features of the cataloging software. First of all, it's web-based. It's entirely accessed through a web browser, so you don't need specialized software. You don't need to be stuck with, you know, a Windows program that you have to run as an application. It's all through a web browser. That means you can get it on Macs, PCs. You can get it on iPads if you want. It's multilingual. That means we don't assume that you speak English. We don't assume that you're cataloging in a single language. All fields can be set up to be multiple language fields. And in fact, the front ends, as you'll see in a couple examples, will actually shift what language is used based on who you are. And that's something that a lot of our initial use was in Europe and countries like Belgium, where everything's cataloged in 2 or 3 languages. So that's very important for them. It can be important for you, so I'll mention it. It's not object-centric. Most collections management software we've seen tends to assume that objects are what you're most interested in. And what we found was that there are lots of projects where people are what you're interested in, or events. So we have lots of we have a database structure that lets you focus on anything you want. It could be objects, it could be events, it could be people, and you can actually reorient both the back-end interface and the presentation interfaces to focus on any or all of them. As I said before, it's configurable schema, What that means is that you can set up the fields the way you want. We have lots of different kinds of fields. They range from the classics, text and numbers and dates, to maps, intelligent date ranges, and all sorts of other things. You'll see, again, examples later. Compound fields, you can make fields that are assemblages of lots of other subfields. That lets you actually support complex metadata schemas like PB core, Spectrum, which is more of a process standard than a metadata standard. It's basically a toolkit for implementing support for whatever metadata standard or standards you want to support. And we've pre-configured it for some standards. We have what we call installation profiles, which are XML documents that actually define what the initial setup of the system is. And we have standard ones that you can use for PB core, Dublin core, VRA, things like that. And you can also use those, modify them, and use them for your own. We also have lots of different schemas that have been set up for specific projects that have been contributed by users, and you can use those as the basis of your own project. It's extensible. We have lots of plugins, as you'll see, that do things like go to Library of Congress, maps, things like that. We have lots of digital asset management functions, and the definition of digital asset management is somewhat fuzzy. But if you care about dealing with media, the software is designed to deal with lots and lots of file formats in a good way. It can transcode video from many formats into web formats. It can generate preview images from PDFs for document viewers, and again, we'll see that later. We support vocabularies like the Getty AAT, mapping, and then we also have a system for providing web services, so you can feed your data to other systems and also consuming web services. So I just took a screenshot of one place that actually lets us show their data publicly on the back end, which is the Coney Island History Project. It's a historical society in Brooklyn, New York. And I'll actually show you live what it looks like, because I wasn't sure if I'd actually have internet, so I figured I'd make screenshots of everything. I can find it.
It was just there.
Yeah, well, it is too. Okay, so, oops, sorry. So this is, so again, you literally log in via a web browser when it shows up. Okay, and I'm going to log in as administrator because just in case. And I'm not going to give you an entire tour of the software. I just want to show you, just give you an idea of how one interacts with it. Once you log in, okay, we actually have a dashboard that you can set up that lets you monitor system. This is the one and only novelty widget, which is the funny cat widget. And it goes online and it actually grabs funny cat pictures off the internet. It's the only joke in the entire system, so I forgot it was there, but there you go. Anyway, actually, it broke because we rely on pulling pictures up of a feed, and they changed the feed, and we got so many bug reports, more than anything else. It's like, the lolcats are broken, fix the lolcats. So one time I got developers actually contributing code was like, I had a guy in Germany, I fixed the lolcats for you. So if I do something like, say, postcards, and this is just in a search interface, I'm going to get lots of postcards, again, when they show up. Connection's a little slow. Maybe I won't do this all live. I thought I had a good connection. Well, what you get is, if it was working, you would get lots and lots of pictures of postcards, and you can click on them, and you get a screen like this. And these fields can be arranged or defined any way you like. This is just how they have it set up. They've got their title, and then they've got how they organize it, and their accession numbers. And there are a lot of the details that you're wondering about, like, for example, hey, that looks like an accession number. How do you set that up? They can all be configured because people have told us what the formats are. We've seen lots of formats. If you're doing year.lot.object number, we can do that. If you have some other wacky system, we can do that too. And if we can't do your wacky system, you can write a plugin to do it. Although with numbering, we've never seen anyone actually write a plugin. But for other ones, you can. In terms of public access features, we have lots of different features, some of which are similar to what you've seen in Viewshare. Faceted browsing, where you can pull up things based on all the names that are in the system for people, places, browse by dates, so you can browse by ranges of dates if you want. We also have facilities for user-provided content, tagging and commenting. We have a lightbox feature in the standard software that we give you for public access that lets users log in, create sets of things, and then do things like share them with others, print PDFs off of them, make ordered collections they can use as slideshows, and also purchase images or license images, as I'll show you in a little bit. We have some systems for creating tours, because we have some people who are very interested in doing mobile tours with their material. And yeah, there are mobile applications that have been developed, some not by us, and they're either open source or being open source very soon. We also have been focused on media presentation. So again, I have these screenshots I wanted to show you, and maybe I'll try again in a minute. We try and use standard viewers whenever possible, or at least open source viewers that are supported by someone else. In this case, we have a document viewer. This is just the overview screen for it. That is actually used by New York Times, and they open sourced it for looking at long form documents. So it's really quite good at looking at documents that are very, very long, hundreds or thousands of pages, whether it be PDFs or individual scanned images. We have an HTML5 audio video player, which again uses HTML5 on browsers that do it. We'll fall back to Flash and ones that don't. We also have a pan and zoom image viewer that is entirely HTML5 and uses a Talbot format. I know before you saw one in Omeka that uses Zoomify. We use an open source standard. Zoomify is commercial, right? Still? Yeah, because everything we distribute is open source, we had to make our own essentially. So we use a format called Talbot, which was developed by UC Berkeley back in 2000. It was supposed to take over the world, but never did. So like one of 3 projects that use it. It's a really simple format, so it's like anyone who looked at it, it's just a bunch of JPEGs embedded in a wrapper. But it actually works really nicely. I'm going to be brave and try that again, okay? There's my postcards. So you can do things like, if I click on it, now I'm being really brave, right? Okay. Sorry, this is so slow. I just wanted to give you an example of okay. All right, well, again, I was being a little too brave there. Anyway, if that worked, you'd be able to pan and zoom on those. And this image in particular is a Coney Island image. It's very, very high resolution. It's about 10,000 pixels across. We've seen images that are 40, 50, 60,000 pixels across. So it's real nice, and it's all built into the software. When you upload a TIFF or a JPEG, it will automatically create all these for you. So you just throw the TIFF or the JPEG or whatever it is that you have at the system. It understands it. It then generates all these derivatives, all the JPEGs to the zooming one. For video, it'll generate the web video. For documents, it'll generate the version for preview. Okay, so again, I'm hoping the internet will be a little bit better in a minute, because I want to show you some actual demos here.
I'm finding that if you're not completely active, you have to re-log on again.
Okay, let me try it now, because I actually do want to show you some of these demos live. Okay, it might just be the Coney Island system, because Nova Muse, which is one of the sites, just went really quickly. So maybe that's it. Okay, so cool, thank you. All right, so I want to show you some examples of what people have done with the software. And again, if one strikes your fancy and you want to know more about it, just stop me. Because I have a lot of them, and I don't know which ones people are really going to care about. Nova Muse is a portal providing access to 51 collections that are located across Nova Scotia. As you can see from the map, they're really scattered all across Nova Scotia. The bits where it's empty are the bits where no one lives. And if you've been to Nova Scotia, you can it's a portal. So you have 51 museums that are all members of a consortium called the Association of Nova Scotia Museums. They all use CollectiveAccess. They had previously used an Access database that had been developed for them by the consortium, and Access started breaking every time they updated the operating system. And it got to the point where people were losing data and freaking out. So they decided to go for an open source alternative, and they liked the fact that this is web-based because it was right around the time that pretty much everyone in Nova Scotia got internet access. Like, that worked all the time. So everyone was really happy. They switched over to CollectiveAccess, and they were like, great. Now we'll have the same collections catalog. It's all being backed up centrally. This is great. Now we want to make a website that people can see everything in the province that's stored in these museums. So this portal was built. This portal is just another version of CollectiveAccess that sucks in data from the other 51 and makes it available. This is the homepage. I'll show you very quickly. I mean, otherwise, except for the fact that it sucks in and deals with data from 51 places, it's what you'd expect in a collections management system. Like if I type in lobster, I'll get pictures of things that are related to lobsters. And you see, some of them have pictures, some of them don't, because these 51 museums range from really, really small places that have a handful of volunteers and are open 3 months a year to places that have professional staffs that are open year-round. It's all over the place. So there are lots of challenges in doing that, one of which was it's a consortial model. It's got 51 places and they're all over the place. So one of the things you have to deal with is data is uneven. Some people's data is really clean, some places data is really, really terrible. So we let individual sites control what can go online, but we also assume that they may not be doing that right. So we have in the portal a quality control filter that we're changing as we see what's coming in. And it does things like says, say if the image is less than 500 pixels wide, don't use it because it's probably junk. If titles have certain words, don't use them, they're probably junk. And things like that. And there's a lot of triggers. If the descriptive text field is empty, don't use it. So some of them are really basic, some of them are a little fancier. But the idea is that the portal is actually filtering so that we can control a little bit. You'll still see junk in there, but it's a lot less than it would have been. But what we also do is we actually feed that quality control info back to the sites so that they can fix it. So the idea is that they have a little dashboard that says, we rejected 38% of your records because, and here's why. And we don't know if this site just went online in September, so we don't know if that works yet. And we suspect that certain personality types it will never work on. But we're hopeful that at least 50% of the people in Nova Scotia will actually, of the museum people in Nova Scotia, will respond to this and actually fix their data over a period of time. And because we're harvesting nightly, so what you're seeing is actually what's going on at any moment. If you're interested in Nova Scotia history, up to the minute. One of the other things that we're hoping that the data cleanup will do is that it will enable us to take the next steps, which are, if you look at that site, and you can look at it at novamuse.ca, you'll notice that there are no timelines, there are no maps, and it seems really obvious that there should be. And part of the reason is that the dates and the map coordinates are still so questionable that we really don't want to expose them visually, where you see those outliers in Antarctica popping up and know that it's junk until people have a chance to really grasp that. So the idea is that we're letting people build those things, we're letting them have the maps and the timelines on the back end so they can see what their data looks like. And then hopefully this time next year, maps will appear on that site. So this is all part of a plan to try and drive people into actually kind of doing this data cleanup for a defined reward, which is seeing their data online. Because everyone's really enthusiastic about having their data online. Because otherwise, no one, only the few people who actually get out to these places, some of them are very remote, will ever see it. And I should also mention, they want to do a mobile app. One of the biggest industries in Nova Scotia besides paper making and fishing is tourism. And they have this notion that people are going to be walking around with their phones and it's like, whoa, that's the bridge. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think it would be fun to see. And they know that you can't have a mobile app like that without maps. So that's what we're working towards. Next one is digitallibraryhsp.org. That's the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. This one is, as I'll show you in a sec, is a very straightforward digital image library. They're actually just scanning their holdings, their archival holdings, and putting them online systematically. What's interesting about this is the scale is pretty good. There's over 60,000 archival items in there already. And it has an automated e-commerce system. What they do is they have been cherry picking their collections based on two criteria: how important it is, based on the resources they have, how important it is, and also does someone want to buy it. So if you want to buy it, they'll scan it right away because they want to sell it to you. Otherwise, they're just working their way through collections, which are huge. So this automated e-commerce system is designed to let people not just buy things like I want to buy a print, I want to buy an umbrella with this image on it, which they're happy to do as well, but also to license it because much of their revenue comes from licensing. So there's an e-commerce system built into the standard CollectiveAccess front-end software that actually, and the back-end software as well, that lets you manage not just selling things, selling merch, but also negotiating licensing deals, which is a very different kind of model than the typical shopping cart. And I'll show you a little bit what that looks like, because I'm betting that this actually works as well. So you can see, this is, it's your standard issue thing. You type something, you can get some hits on it. You type in Lincoln, you're going to get lots of Lincoln. Good. That worked, yes. Some of the records have very little in it. again, I've been saying they've been cherry picking. The idea is that they want to get things in as quickly as possible. Most have actually a lot more than this. Also, I think I could show you, I'll show you the zooming image viewer here. So you see it's a little pokey, but it's usually much quicker. So you see you can go in and zoom, and these are all generated on the fly. And it's got, all your standard issue tools. And what's nice about it is it works on iPhones and iPads because it's not Flash. And then, if you want to purchase it, you can go and, excuse my password, and you can actually, log in. They've got a whole raid schedule. You can register. I'm going to log in. This is going to have, and you see when you log in, you actually have a light box. This light box has extra stuff in it because I've been on here before. And I can go, for this one I want usage rights for editorial. This one I want low res and usage rights for exhibition, that kind of thing. And then there's a whole process, which I won't go through because I only have almost no time, that will let you deal with that. So it's interesting, if you want to sell stuff, you can do that. And we're trying to make that selling stuff cheap. One other thing which I want to mention, because part of the title of my presentation is Lessons Learned, so I want to tell you what we've discovered in doing these projects. Disk space is actually more expensive than you think when it's hosted. I know hard drives are cheap, but hosting is really expensive. And a lot of these projects tend to underestimate how much they're going to need. HSP is one of them, where in order to actually sell things and fulfill them digitally, in other words, just send the files out to people for licensing, you need to have the originals. They're huge. They're 40, 50, 100 megs a piece. They're easily outstripped their hosting allotment. And every time they double it, their price doubles. And that translates into several $1,000s a year every time they upgrade. So one of the things that we ended up having to do was to figure out how we can actually have high resolution somewhere else in the Historical Society, which has limited bandwidth, and then only pull them as needed. So one of the things that we end up doing is having some ways to conserve this space on the public-facing server, and then only pull things when we need them. So we did that as well, and that's just a lesson that no one really has come to realize, because everyone just thinks that disks are infinite, except rack space, they are infinite rack space and all these other hosting providers, but they want you to pay for them, and it got really expensive very quickly. How much time do I have?
8.
Okay, I'm doing good. Okay, so I know Drupal was mentioned before, and we do integrate with Drupal. An example is James Ensor Online, which is a project of the Flemish Art Collection, which is a provincial agency in Belgium. This was, again, I can show you the site. You can check it out yourself. You see the URL up there. It's a little, not terribly catchy, jamesensor.vlaamskunstcollectie.be. And
straight off the tongue.
yeah, well, if you're Dutch, it's totally catchy. Anyway, and this is a site that's actually primarily interesting, I think, to some of you, in that it uses Drupal. Drupal is the front end for it. CollectiveAccess is the back end. All of the material is managed in CollectiveAccess. Some of the media, like the zooming viewer, is based on media processing done by CollectiveAccess, but ultimately it's a Drupal site. So everything's piped into Drupal and then used. How do we do this? Well, these guys in Belgium, who are a commercial company, develop modules, and now they're open source. So you can all use them. And they hook up with our software. And we talk to them, and every so often they tell us, send us more code. So it's great. Now you might wonder why Belgium. I don't know. For some reason, I don't understand. We're really big in Belgium. There's like a huge cottage industry in Belgium using CollectiveAccess, and Drupal as well, because Drupal was developed by Belgians. So Drupal, I understood, never really got what they like us. I'll run through a few others, and then you should stop me if you want to hear more about them. I don't know if there's any art museums here, but there's been more and more interest in doing catalog raisonné, which are catalogs of the total output of an artist's work over his lifetime. And this is an example of CollectiveAccess being used in that role. The Isamu Noguchi catalog raisonné. Noguchi was a Japanese-American artist and modernist. His museum is in New York. And what's interesting about that, I think, is that, first of all, it is a hybrid system. They had bought TMS, the museum system, before they started the catalog on the assumption that the catalog would fit into it, and then discovered that it wouldn't. But they were already committed to TMS, so they have their TMS system. A lot of the data for the catalog is in TMS. Their collection's in TMS. And then CollectiveAccess is used to publish the catalog online and to hold all the bits that TMS can. And then there's a whole process that's totally custom that we help them build that will pull things from TMS. Now you'll notice that unlike Novum used that pulls every night, they pull every 6 months, and that's because catalogs are not supposed to change that often. So it's a very controlled pull as opposed to getting things up quickly. But otherwise, it's besides that program that's pulling from TMS, everything else is pretty standard. And it has things for bibliographies, for exhibition histories, for chronologies. So some of that, even if you're not an art museum, might be of interest if you want to manage bibliographic references, if you want to manage chronologies of events and things like that. Oh, actually, one other thing is that the next release of this, which is 2012, this is the bottom point, we're going to be generating on-demand printed catalogs. And so the idea is to take that database content and roll it out into a PDF that looks almost like a book. And I say almost because these catalogs tend to be about 1,000 pages. And the ones that you'll see, the traditional ones, which cost a fortune, that everyone's trying to avoid publishing now, are beautiful. But they're also the product of years of work from graphic designers. And no one can afford to do that anymore. So digital is where everything's going in the catalog resume world. We're trying to approximate, to 80% of the quality, the printed layout of it. And we've actually done a decent job, I think. So if you want to actually run books out of things, you can actually get a decent layout out of a database. At least that's what we found so far. This is an example page of a catalog for a work of art. And again, if you want, stop me and I'll go into more detail. East End Stories is another site. This one's actually interesting because Parish Art Museum is an art museum, but this is more of a historical society project. They want to document, this is an IMLS grant that to develop a resource that documents the history of arts on the East End of Long Island. So we did a bunch of improvements that they paid for, and now it's part of the software, and everyone else gets it. The site itself does all sorts of nice little plugins that do things like, sorry, I managed to misplace it now. It's a nice database that actually keeps track of all of the artists who were working there. Okay, let's see if this works. And then lets you find out more about them. And it has things like chronology. You go to like Willem de Kooning's page. It'll actually give you like map coordinates of where he lived and where he worked, and then archival images. If you click on an archival image, it'll take you more information about it. So it's designed to actually integrate whatever information they have, which includes a lot of georeference data, a lot of time data. And this is all being done, all the cataloging is done by interns, and they've been pretty good at it. Let's go to a more interesting time period. So this is just a straight kind of, this code, the site is not a custom site. The theme is custom. Someone actually sat there and designed this. But the code itself is a standard code you can download from us. And to give you an idea, if you download that standard code, what it looks like is this. But if you get a web designer in, this is what it looks like standard. It's just nice and just very, very basic stuff. But if you get a web designer in, you can go and change it to whatever you want. So let's see, what else do we have? I'm going to skip over some of these because we're running out of time. I'll tell you a little about Vivant so Frei is a German site that documents the fall of the Berlin Wall for people's images and photographs, images and video and film. And it's all georeferenced, it's all in 2 languages. It's a really interesting site. Again, standard issue software, just theme. Chicago Film Archives is a small nonprofit in Chicago that has what used to be the Chicago Public Library's film collection that they were going to throw in the garbage. And someone said stop and took it and moved it to an even smaller room. And now they realized since no one goes to visit them, they should have a website. And you can actually get this video as they digitize it online. It's a lot of it's a really interesting collection. A lot of highly varied stuff. What I wanted to spend a little time on is philoplace.org, which is another Historical Society of Pennsylvania project. And this was a project that's totally custom. And basically it blends archival material from the city archives, the Historical Society, and University of Pennsylvania. But what's interesting about it is, unfortunately it's custom. So it's actually this thing that is a beautiful site that you can't really replicate. Although the developers of the site will sell you a copy of it. We open source our stuff, but that doesn't mean that you have to. So this developer actually will sell you for $25,000, something like that. They'll actually sell you a copy of this to use. But what they have is they have this idea of, you can go to a map, for example, of Philadelphia, and everything's geo-referenced, and you can click on it and find out more about it. Now this blends content management with collections management. So the idea is they've blended stories, narratives, with archival images, archival video, and also newly created video to actually tell a story. And it's a story that you can navigate or yourself, or you can let them navigate for you. And it's a really beautiful site. It also integrates historic maps. So like if I go to say 1895 Bromley map, this is all done with Google Maps. So it's really great. You know, they went and they registered these maps and got them to all work. So it's a really great site, and it shows you what you can do if you want to put enough time and energy into it as well. This was done about 2.5 years ago, and since then a number of these things have become standard features because we've ended up writing them for other people ourselves in open source way. But it's definitely a great way to show where things can go. I'm sorry.
Could you click on the add a story?
Yeah, I was just about to do that actually. One of the other things that this has, which is an example of something that we just built open source, was add a story. And we call it contribute, they call it add a story. And you know, first you get this help thing, and then you can go and it's just a step-by-step thing. I'll just try and run through it. I'm just gonna make it up. I'm not gonna actually submit this. Okay, and then you can go and you can type it in, and you just do a step-by-step. And there's a part in there where it actually asks you if you have any video or audio to upload. We have a version of this which is configurable we call it the contribute plugin. And we think of some place that uses it. This place uses it. It's going to be in the next release of the software. And let me just I can remember what the login is for this. Let's see. I know what it is. Sorry, it's guest. I don't know how I remember all these passwords. Everyone has the same problem, right?
Yeah.
Just don't write them down. So this is an example. Now this form, by the way, our version actually lets you set up the fields and set how they're sized. And this is the development site, so someone's still messing with it. But the idea is that you can actually add multiple media and things like that. And you can have date fields with date pickers and stuff. We realized there's a lot of demand for it, so we ended up writing a generic plugin. And you can make it look however you want. What happens when you submit this form, just like the Philoplace one, is a record is created in the database. That's a collections. It can be a collection level record. It could be a record that's an authority record, like a person or a place or an event. So you can have it generate any kind of record you want, but that record is also marked as being user contributed. So the idea is that it's submitted, it's marked, someone periodically goes in, looks at it, and decides what to do with it. But they're not just these things that just show up in some weird nether region of the database. They're actually meant to be records that are cataloged. And the idea with this site, which is an artist studio, is that the people in the studio who aren't catalogers are actually submitting things. And then the archivists are going in and just making sure that they look good. So everyone here is trusted. But we also have situations like the East End Stories thing, the Paris one I just showed you, has a form like that too, where you're not trusted. We don't know, you could be a kook, you could be a robot, a spam robot, or whatever. So, you know, there's this idea of review. And you can set up a dashboard widget, that thing with the cats when we first logged in, that will list all those. So I have to go right. Okay. Can I have like 1 more minute? Okay. They're gonna get rid of me. So I promised that there'd be lessons, right? Well, here's the lessons, take them as you wish, but these are the things that have come up time and time again in either doing these projects or watching people do them. I know it sounds really trite, but planning is really good. Trying to articulate what the requirements are and exploring alternatives is really important. It's much easier with free software because, again, at least even if you waste your time, you haven't wasted all that money licensing that software and feeling bad about throwing it away. Experimentation is good when it's cheap. Also, it's not just a software problem. A lot of people that we've seen, when they come into it thinking that the software is going to do it for them, that's when the projects fail. So understanding, getting everyone together, archivists and content experts, and thinking it through and understanding the software is just one piece is really important. Again, I know it sounds trite, but we've seen a lot happen a lot. Involve real users, involve users that care to give you feedback early and often. and fully understand what you have to work with. We've seen a lot of projects that think they're going to have things that will show up on a map properly, and when they don't, the entire project goes into a crater. The last thing is, as far as technical lessons, try and envision your use cases, which is corporate speak for it. If you think you might do a mobile thing, do it early. That way you can plan adequately and not waste time and money. Choose your hosting providers carefully, like I said before. We've seen it more and more, people are running out of space because they're doing all this really high quality scanning, high quality video digitization, goes right through the end of their plan and ends up costing them money and putting huge holes in their budget. Try and use standard software code and architectures. Even though Fill a Place is beautiful, it's custom, and I wish they would have done it standard because it would have been reusable and it would have been a lot more maintainable. They haven't been able to update their version of CollectiveAccess in 2 years. They just can't. Everything would break. And don't be afraid to stray from metadata standards when you need to. I know there's a Library of Congress person in this room, so I'm going to get down early. A lot of people start with this idea, I'm only going to use PB Core for my film archive, and it's good to actually have an open mind. Start with that standard and then deviate when needed, but definitely don't feel like you can't deviate. And then finally, understand the difference between content management and collections management. Collections are what you're legally responsible for, what you're a custodian for. Content management is all the other stuff that's usually the cooler part. And keeping a wall between understanding where they are will save you a lot of headaches. So anyway, thank you.
Thanks go out to Tom, Trevor, and Seth for taking the time and effort to come to Hartford today, and know that we were all far less uninformed than we were at the start of this session. The next gatherings in the various conference halls begins at 1:15. I would say for convenience, there's a public cafeteria downstairs. I understand that it's subsidized, it's pretty good and relatively inexpensive. And thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Oh, really?
Tell me about that.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, Philip is like